Good evening, everyone. It's Dadman Walking 55, Dadman Walking 55. How are you doing tonight? We are coming live to you at 2 minutes after 8 on the East Coast of the United States of America. Good old East Coast time zone, the one time zone that should be made official all around the world. Everybody should be on Eastern Standard Time. But the people in the Central time zones keep rebelling against us, so what are you going to do? But glad to have y'all with us for another one of our chill chats, chilling with tonight. Chill chats are usually when I go live, or maybe the missus joins me. The chilling withs are when we take some time and we have a guest on, and we talk about a topic or anything else that comes to mind, whatever they like to talk about, and just have some fun, get to know somebody, learn some stuff that we don't know about. You guys know I'm an accountant by trade, so art and artist and that type of stuff. Music is not my thing, but hey, through this channel, through these type of streams, I'm hoping to learn a lot more, and we're hanging out together and have some fun. And while we do it, without further ado, let me go ahead and invite our guest on. I told him backstage, it's one of the people around YouTube. And I go back to probably 2018 or something, a long way. Clownfish TV and Nerdrotic were the two channels that got me into watching YouTube and stuff and participating in chats. And this is a guy I've seen around since way back then. And this is how cool it is to all these years later. I actually have my own channel now. I can invite him in. He's a Modrotic, which is woohoo. A big honor for me to get a guy like this on, but not just that. He's a really classy guy, great voice. You'll love it when you hear it. If you've not heard this guy, a guy with a voice that should be heard on his own channel and everywhere else, it's the great Just Another Redshirt. Hey, Redshirt.
Good evening.
How are you tonight?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right. Well, good.
Yes.
Hey, glad to have you with us tonight. Like I said, it's kind of funny how we've been bumping around in the chat over the years.
Oh yes, I've bumped into you a lot of times in the chat over the years.
Oh yeah, and it changed because for a long time I was Homer Simpson, then I became the Tiki doll, and then now this avatar here, thanks to my kid making it for me when I started after I started last year. So
that's a great avatar.
Oh, it is. The kid took my original ideas, which is Fortnite and football, and actually morphed them into one of my favorite characters, Peely, the banana in Fortnite, and made it, combined it with a football, as you can see with the stitching and the brown. Yep. And actually, when you see the picture itself, you know how the football has the ingrained dots on the surface of it?
Yes.
That's how much detail the kid put in this picture.
Wow.
Just not a solid brown, but actually included the dots. So, but hey, I can't take enough time to brag on my kid. So a lot of that's here. Actually, the kid's one of the impetuses of me with this channel. She's like, Dad, get your own channel. Get your own channel. So, So we used to do a podcast on her channel, but now we do one on we brought it back to third Wednesdays on my channel now. So the Walking and Rambling podcast, where we just sit back and have a good time talking about whatever comes up. So let me so just a little bit about yourself. Do you want to say let's take a moment just to tell everybody while I wait for a few more people to show what about you? How did you get into YouTube and of course become a mod as many places as you are?
Well, strangely enough, I got into YouTube because I used to be a blog reader, if you remember what blogs were way back in the day.
Wow.
And one of the blogs I read regularly included a link to one of the Nerdrotic videos. I think it was Hollywood is, the actors are fleeing Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched that YouTube video, and I had never really watched YouTube much before. I just kind of randomly fell into it occasionally if somebody put out a link and I watched it. And I started going through Gary's back catalog on Nerdrotic and was like, this guy is I've never heard anybody talk about shows and movies and stuff like this guy does. This guy's hysterically funny, extremely knowledgeable, he was talking about, I think he was talking about Doctor Who, which I was getting very unhappy with at the time. And I started watching his Doctor Who videos. And a few years ago, I decided I want to be a member of the channel.
Mm-hmm.
And as I told you backstage, I found out from YouTube in the process of signing up for his channel as a member that I had to have my own YouTube channel. And I thought, oh, geez, I don't want to have a YouTube channel. I don't want to actually do this, but I got to have a name to apparently
Mm-hmm.
to put in the chat. So what am I going to call my channel? And I said, well, I'm a fan of old science fiction, television, and books, and Star Trek is cool. So, but I'm not anybody special. I'm just some guy in the chat. So I said, well, a red shirt. Those are the extras in Star Trek, the original series. And I thought, yeah, but I'm not even like a fancy red shirt like Scotty or Uhura. So I
Right.
said, oh, I know, just another red shirt. And I'll just one of those guys waiting for the turbo lift doors to open with about in a dozen or so, extras waiting around. And that was actually my first avatar. It was a bunch of red shirts standing in the hallway of the Enterprise waiting for the turbo lift doors to open. And that's how I came up with the name. And it was literally on the spur of the moment. It took me about a minute and a half to come up with the channel name. And I finished signing up for a
Mm-hmm.
membership on Nerdrotic. And I started hanging out in chats. And
Mm-hmm.
as often happens, if if the head mod is paying attention to how people deal with people who attack them or people who give them shit in the chat, and if
Mm-hmm.
you're an adult about it and you handle it gracefully, they tend to be like, that person might make a good mod.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up having two other wrenches, and Eric K, was and is the head wrench for Nerdrotic, was also a wrench on the second channel. So he got to
Mm-hmm.
see me in action as a wrench and helped me out and started showing me the ropes. And within about another month, he'd recommended me to Gary and Lady Gravemaster, who was his
Mm-hmm.
producer at the time. And all of a sudden, on a Friday Night Tights, Gary announced that our newest female wrench is so and so, and then he got interrupted. And I went, wait a minute, did he just start to say just another red shirt? No, can't be,
Oh
cannot
no.
be. And then he finally got back to his thing. He says, and just another red shirt. And wait, you got to be kidding me in the chat.
You hit
And
the big time.
my name turned blue and the wrench appeared, and I'm like, oh my god. And I spent the rest of Friday Night Nights in shock, thanking people for congratulations as they
Oh yeah.
congratulated me on getting a
Well,
wrench.
that's what I hear though, is especially when there's a big chat and stuff like that. Some people don't go in and talk, but the thing, because they don't talk because they're afraid if they go in, everybody's going to address them and they can't extricate themselves either, which is
Oh yeah.
understandable. Yeah.
Oh, it is, especially other YouTubers coming into the chat. I mean, I'll say hello, but I
Mhm.
don't expect them to say hello back, because if
Yeah.
somebody with a popular channel shows up even for 10 minutes on Friday Night Tights, they will spend their entire time saying hello to people if they respond. I spend
Right.
the first half an hour of FNT saying hello to people.
Well, that's cool. Well, hey, have you tried out your new wrench here?
No, I haven't tried it out, but I don't see any reason to try it out yet.
Well, if you wanted to say hi, we could break it out and make sure I did it right. Let's see.
Well, I can see it in the prompt box.
Oh, okay, you are. Wait, I'll take that then. We
I got a pop up.
Hey, there you go. I now hit a big time. I got Just Another Redshirt as a mod on this channel. Thank you, sir. Wonderful, and thank you for allowing me to do that. But hey, it's not quite the same thing as Gary saying your name on YouTube. But hey,
that was
it's still an honor.
That was insane. That
It's
was
still
nuts.
an honor for me, sir. Appreciate it. Well, let's go ahead and say hi to everybody in the chat. Hopefully, y'all enjoyed Red Shirts. You don't mind me just calling you Red Shirt, do you?
Not at all.
Okay. So it's his first time to have him on, and y'all all know, if you've been around YouTube, you know who it is. And Stunning and Brave Megatron is here first, of course. He's saying that we need to adapt Cybertron's Ruststorm Central Time. No, I don't know. You're Central. Are you Central or Eastern?
I'm Central Time.
Central. Okay, so you might agree with him. Okay, but okay, it's a battle we always fight with Rambling Canuck too. He's always big on the Central Time Zone for me. Lisa's here. Hey, Lisa. She's second. Hey. And she says hi to both of us. And there's the name in blue. Just Another Redshirt. Thank you for being here, sir. And Zachariah 315. Howdy, Zachariah. Appreciate you being here. So we've got, and Masters Maniac Mexico. All right. Yes, red shirts matter and golden signs. How are you tonight, Masters? Good to see you. Good to see you. But hey, oh wow. So we've we've got 9 people in the chat. Make sure on the Twitch side that you follow us if you haven't already. We're at 93 followers on that side. We are at we're back for now at 495 subs on the YouTube side. So make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Make sure you get the like. Tweet it out if you can, because you know where we are on Twitter at DadmanWalking55, and it's only DadmanWalking55. We actually, there's a reason why we had to. I'll explain it later, Red Shirt. So, but hey, see, he's on for Star Trek and Dadman. No, we're not doing Star Trek tonight. Although I know that we got a guy that could probably hold his own with the greatest of greats out there talking Star Trek. We're actually going to go in the world of animation tonight. Just Another Red Shirt, right?
That's absolutely right.
And you prepared a few things, some areas for us to talk about. But let's start in general concept, and then maybe we can work down into those specific areas. We're talking about animation, specifically old cartoon shows. You like old cartoon shows?
Well, I like what I like is full animation, and there's a distinction. In full animation, every frame has every character in the frame hand drawn for that frame. In partial animation, a character or characters are mostly drawn, turned into a cell, laid over a background, and then the animators just move the eyes, the mouth, maybe the head, a hand. But the rest of the body stays static. And that's for cost saving, which we'll get into, why full animation was replaced with partial animation. Now, with modern animation, you have anime, which is still very much a going thing. And anime is forced to use a mix of full and partial animation, that just, again, because of the cost. And then there's computer animation, which is totally like Pixar and DreamWorks, totally off the wall in terms of what it costs and why. You look at the cast. If you look at a Pixar movie's credits, you look at the number of people involved in making computer animation for a Pixar film, and it's like, what was the computer doing? You've got about it looks like you got 75 people making this cartoon, this animated feature. At least it is a feature as opposed to a short. But it turns out that you have to tell, I'm beginning to understand, you have to tell the computer everything you want it to render. So you essentially have to draw it for the computer, but you don't get to do that with a pencil and a piece of paper like you used to in the old days. And it takes a lot of effort to get it right. Now, when it's right, it's amazing. And Pixar for a long time were masters of character animation with computers. And that came down to one guy named John Lasseter.
Right.
And he started Pixar on the road to becoming an animation studio. And I love that. I've been a fan of Pixar for years. But I like all the animation. It's just that some I like more than others, because one of the things is art style matters to me. Disney in the 1990s, when they did, for example, The Emperor's New Groove, or Hercules, or even later, Home on the Range, it got very, very pointy and angular. And I didn't much care for it because Disney had developed over the decades a Disney style. And if you think about it, it starts with Snow White. It goes through cartoons like the Aristocats and, Beauty and the Beast and Lady and the Tramp. And those are all classic Disney cartoons. They're wonderful. But the art style was fairly consistent throughout those. And I think part of that was Walt Disney himself, because Walt would walk up and look over somebody's shoulder and tell them whether he liked it or not. And from what I understand about Walt Disney, if he didn't like it, it got redone.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Old
that was
school
where the
Mandarin. Yeah,
consistency came from. It was what Walt liked.
exactly. Now
But
you
art
talked about
style
the Disney
matters.
style, but you talked about the Disney style in the '90s. Was that still hand drawn then? There, the style was the computers come in
It
with Pixar.
was.
Okay.
Yes, computers came in with Pixar and DreamWorks. Those are the two premier computer animation, 3D animation houses.
See what you
And
said there too
there's
is looking at the credits. I've noticed what you said. It's like there's like 250 names on there for, and you would think logically, you would think you just input the computer and the computer should just take care of it with fewer people. Normally that's what happens in most businesses is that the computer replaces the people, but it's like you got to have more people to input the computer.
yeah, yeah. Computer animation turned out to be very labor intensive process, and it's one of the reasons why there really have only been two very good computer animation houses over the last 40 years. Pixar and DreamWorks. I mean, DreamWorks is famous for Shrek for the most part, and Pixar, of course, is famous for all kinds of things. And Pixar is really an interesting story because if you get the first volume of the Pixar shorts,
Mm-hmm.
uh, all their shorts before they made their first feature film, Pixar originally was a technology company. They were creating hardware and software for 3D image processing.
Mm-hmm.
And the shorts were made for marketing purposes. They weren't to be displayed in a theater, they were to be shown at a trade show to people they were trying to sell hardware and software to do image processing. And they
Mm-hmm.
brought John Lasseter in to help improve the look of their animated marketing films, if you will. And of course, he hit gold on the second one because he made a short film called Luxo Junior.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a computer printed model of Luxo Junior on the shelf behind me. That's the one with the two lamps,
Right.
the adult lamp and the child lamp, and the child lamp comes in playing with a ball and jumps up and down on it until it deflates. That
Okay.
that
Well,
child lamp, look, that became their mascot. That's now
right.
the symbol of Pixar.
Right. The little white lamp.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, and Lasseter said, he said they put this lovely little soundtrack on it and nobody heard it because the minute the short started, everybody started whooping and hollering and whistling and clapping. And after it was shown, uh, he was at a reception, and this multi PhD computer genius software guru comes striding across the floor, headed straight for him. And I know I've told this story before, but it's one of my favorite stories. And he's thinking, "Oh my goodness, he's going to ask me how we did the shading on the ball and the lamps, and I have no idea." And the guy walked up to him and said, "John, I have just one question for you. Was the adult lamp the mother or the father?" And
Hmm.
John was just ecstatic because this guy who ordinarily would have been asking a million technical questions about how did you do this and how did you do this, how did you do that, didn't want to know any of those things. He just wanted to know, was that mom or dad? He bought the characters 100%.
That's
And
awesome.
that is
Yeah.
what John Lasseter did. That's what he did for Pixar.
Yeah. I hear, and I'm not trying to get into a lot of the controversy and stuff, but if you know the name, if you know Pixar, there's been a lot of debate about how they've done since he's left the company and stuff, and
Oh yeah.
even some of the new Pixar movies that are coming out just don't look like the old Pixar's. The Toy Story, the really cool ones where they first came around. I mean, so it's funny how the styles within a franchise, a company, even change over time. You would think
Yes,
Pixar would stay the same, but it has changed over the years, hasn't it?
it has, especially since his departure. I mean, he was in charge, creatively in charge of Pixar, literally from the beginning until he left the company. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like Walt Disney was for the Disney Animation Studio. If Lasseter didn't like it, it got redone. Same as Walt. And with him gone, there's no controlling hand on the tiller.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll only say about his departure, which, without getting into politics or anything else, that
Right.
I think his departure represented the same thing Disney did to Lucasfilm and to Marvel Studios. Disney's corporate culture infected the company because they owned them, and that forced Lasseter out. That's my generalized take without getting into too many details.
Mhm.
The man is an absolute genius as far as animation goes, though, because I think that's been proven uh, since the mid 1980s when he started working for Pixar. And Pixar, I don't know whether they will ever come back, but there's now a new company that Lasseter is now running that has just switched over from Sony to Apple, I believe.
Okay.
So we should be seeing some of his new movies coming out on probably Apple TV streaming service in the foreseeable future.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that'll be interesting.
but I mean,
It'll be interesting when
not
his new products start getting on the market and it can be compared head to head. A lot of times
right.
that visuals is the way to hook the audience. Like I've said with comic books, um, all the time is that it's that cover art that gets me. And
Yep.
so like in here, the case is you know the screen quality when you watch a preview. Let's see, I was trying to look up. Wish is a new one that Disney's coming out with. I'm trying to figure out I'm trying to figure out if that is that a Pixar movie or not. Just trying to figure it out.
I'm not sure. I haven't really heard much about
No,
Wish.
and it may not be, but it's I just but I know many times is when you Pixar always had this quality, and it was a consistent quality from movie to movie. Also, plot wise, all the movies were really really good. They were really really vetted, and they completed a good circle with it. And you know that's a key. I think is keeping your quality and still keeping it fresh. But then again, it has changed over the years to not so much, but the thing is to me your trailers hook people. Either they're going
Yep.
to like if they see the trailer and it looks good, the art looks good, even the dialogue is good, you're likely to get people to come watch something. Whereas to say that's another cartoon and just relegate it to cartoon.
Right. Well, it's you talk about styles and whether they can do it, whether they can't do it. I just we accidentally wound up with a copy of a Disney film recently, Mary Poppins Returns. Mrs.
Mm.
Redshirt bought it. She thought she was buying the original, and she
Oh,
wound up buying the sequel, which is from 2018, so 5 years ago.
oh, that one.
And
Yeah.
I have to
Mhm.
say, there is animation, live action mixed with animation in this film. And I have to give Disney credit where credit's due. This is a very nice film. It's a very well written, well acted, well drawn. And I've never seen as much interaction between the live actors and the animated characters as there is in this film. There's one point where there's a big song and dance number, and one of the live actors takes a cane and whips it off to his right. And in the animation, it grabs a penguin by the neck and flings him off stage while he's saying, "Before we get the hook,"
Yeah.
which is an old vaudeville thing where they
Yep.
put a hook out on stage and drag you off. And I just they did a really good job with it. And I'm like, this is only 8 years old. How did Disney manage to produce something this charming, this well done in the last 10 years? So credit where credit's due. They did that really well. So it shows you that Disney animation's not dead, but it's certainly not doing well,
Well,
and hasn't been for a while.
and Master says that latest Toy Story does not lack good technique, but more good storytelling. I don't want my kids to pick up this type of storytelling. Guess company 90% of the parents can't trust Disney. I will just say though, to be fair, it's easy to jump on to one company. I will say, um, I think it's a lot of the companies when it comes to storylines and stuff like that. One of the biggest, craziest movies I ever went with my little ones when they were little was Happy Feet. and it started with a bunch of penguins at the beginning. And the song they used was a song called "Kiss" from Prince. I don't know if you're familiar with the song though, Redshirt. Are you?
I'm not.
Let's put it this way: they basically applied it to this thing, which is almost a mating ritual, which you didn't see in the opening scene. But the whole thing with the words was like, let's put it this way: the words in it are like very suggestive, very provocative, over the top provocative. If you know who Prince was as a musical artist, there was a lot of sexiness into his shows, into the music and what they did, and it came out first scene of the movie right at the intro, and I'm sitting there as a dad like, I hope my kids aren't getting this. I hope my kids aren't getting this. Just shaking my head. So, that's one of my stories always when people start to pick on one or two. It's like a lot of them, because it's what's changed. And we're going to talk about some of the classics and all of those stories and the values to now modern. It's almost like they're blurring the lines between kids can't be kids anymore.
Well, we can get it. We'll get into that. And I'll just say that there used to be suggestive jokes that generally went over the kids' heads.
Right.
With the internet and social media today, kids know a lot more, a lot younger than they would have back in the day. Okay, so that's one of the first things. You can talk about how this song is suggestive. You're worried about whether your kids are going to get it. Your kids are more likely to get it than I would have been when I was a kid, because that wasn't a topic that came up when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
There was no internet. There were no chat rooms. There were, and they didn't want to. I'm not going to start. There are various reasons why children were not exposed to that sort of thing early on. So it tended to go over their heads.
Yes.
And as a result, the cartoonists could put adult jokes in that the kids wouldn't get, as long as they were also doing slapstick, which the kids did get. And the kids would be so busy laughing at the slapstick, they'd miss the joke completely, and then the parents would laugh.
Yep. Yeah.
And there are examples. There's many examples of that from the farther back you go. But there's been a lot of censorship of cartoons since the 90s. And it's weird that sort of thing is being introduced now. And it's because it's a message being delivered. And that's the problem I have with it. It's not being included because it makes the story better. It's being included in many cases because it's trying to nudge the kids. It's trying to get them to understand something they probably shouldn't be exposed to yet.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Agreed. Or even the fact as the parents may not be comfortable with them being presented in a public setting like then. It's just, it makes the parents uncomfortable too, but
right.
It is.
And that's,
yeah. Go ahead.
And that's one of the things that people have complained about recent Pixar movies, but others as well. That, there's elements included that they're like, you didn't need to put that in to tell this story. You put that in because you wanted to put it in front of people, and you wanted to put it in front of the kids who would watch this movie. And that's not an artistic decision. That's an ideological decision. That's an activist as opposed to an artist.
Yeah. And we're going to
get there's a lot of that.
Yeah. And to tell you what, it's like, we'll talk about the older cartoons and stuff, a lot of them nowadays could be made because of course they have guns, all kinds of different other things and themes in it. And it's like, but back then we didn't do that stuff. It did not influence us. But nowadays, it's funny what they will clamp down on, and they'll change and get rid of even movies like even E.T. I guess they changed the guns to walkie-talkies. There's, we had the Han Solo shot first. I know it's not anime, but Han, Greedo shot first in the updated ones, and it just, just things have changed I don't necessarily think for the better, because we had this stuff years ago and it didn't cause a lot of societal problems, but then again we have no problem with certain other themes introducing them. So it's a big mess, isn't it? But hey,
it is, because it's a weird it's a weird thing. It's a weird selection of things that are appropriate and things that are not appropriate.
Yep.
Give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
I've said this on a stream before, and there was a guy on the stream whose eyes were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger as I described this, because he was realizing I was talking about the cartoons he'd watched. There is a series of cartoons from Warner Brothers that are about Bugs versus Daffy trying not to get shot by Elmer. Rabbit Seasoning, Duck, Rabbit, Duck, and one more I can't remember the title of at the moment. And basically, it's Bugs outwitting both Daffy and Elmer so that Daffy gets gets shot. And it's funny because, the shotgun doesn't really hurt Daffy. It just makes his bill fall off or go up to the top of his head or spin around.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in the 90s, they edited that cartoon and they took out all of Elmer's shotgun blasts, but they left everything else in, all the dialogue and everything. And the problem with that is that you have no idea why Daffy's bill is doing all these weird things. And it doesn't make any sense. And this guy I was on the stream with, who was considerably younger than I and who had been watching these cartoons in the 90s, was like, "You mean to tell me that Elmer was actually shooting him every time?" I said, "Yep."
Mm-hmm.
But that's the original, not the one you saw. And so, we went through this period in the 90s in particular where what was appropriate was changing. I got an example of this for you. This is from Pixar. So let me share this. So this is from a short made in 1989 called Knick Knack. And window there. So it should be
I'm waiting to see.
Shared.
Okay.
There it is. So,
okay, here it is.
Yep. So on the left, you have the two girls from the original 1989 cartoon. And they're both, this one down here is a figure in a fishbowl. And this one up here is a knickknack on a shelf. And in 2003, when they decided to include this cartoon as an extra on Finding Nemo, they had to edit it. Look at what they did to both of these female figures between the original and the one they released. Yep. They removed the décolletage. They made them both flat-chested.
Yeah.
And because the originals were quote unquote offensive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the funny thing about this is that this cartoon was supposed to be based on was inspired by Tex Avery's cartoons. Here is, let me see if I can get, there we go. Check, there we go. Put it back up. Lady on the left is from a cartoon from 1942.
Okay.
And that was a Tex Avery cartoon. And I think I could see the inspiration for the two ladies in Knick Knack from her. I mean, she does a song and dance act that's pretty amazing. And it was shown to children. It was shown to everybody in the movie theater. And there's no question she's got curves. So I don't understand this bowdlerization of Knick Knack at all. But this is what happened. This is what really started to happen big time in the 90s. Right. And now they're putting in stuff, I agree with you, probably isn't really a good thing for kids. Because, I mean, if you take your kids to the beach, let's face it, you're going to see a woman who has breast implants and maybe even ass implants in a bikini. And what are you going to do? Tell your kids, don't look? That's a woman.
I got a story. Mrs. is here. Hey, Mrs. Good to see you tonight. We got Just Another Redshirt.
Dadman Walking 55.
Well, we were actually at one of the Orlando Disney water parks in January one year because we went when it was the 180-degree day, and we were not prepared for European men thongs, bathing suits. So
And
obviously,
Speedos.
exactly. So our kids were like the perfect eye height, and this one guy walking around, and you're just like, but yeah, it's like it's what you see. You still see it now today. So what's the problem with our animation? Why not represent people as they could be, really are? Not trying to hide some of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, that's the weird thing. I mean, it's they want to show people the way they want people to think about people, not the way people actually go to the beach or whatever. I mean, there's another funny one that do you know what the Hayes Commission was way back in the day?
I think I've
Hollywood.
heard about it, but go ahead in case there's people here that have not heard of the
Okay.
Hayes Commission.
The Hayes Commission was an industry board, a censorship board created by the Hollywood studios. And they
Now,
did it so that the
let me
government,
ask, was this TV or
sure,
was it TV and theaters?
it was mostly theaters.
Okay.
Because it ended in the early 60s.
Okay.
But the Hayes board, I believe, is the reason that Ricky and Lucy Ricardo slept in separate single beds in I Love Lucy.
Right. Okay.
They couldn't be shown sleeping together in a double bed. That was not done. So the Hayes board was very strict because it was trying to preempt the government from basically censoring movies. Hollywood would clamp down itself. That's where Betty Boop lost her garter and had her skirt lowered, was the Hayes board.
Okay.
And there's a cartoon, early Tweety cartoon, where he's pink. He's like a baby bird who hasn't even grown feathers yet.
Mm-hmm.
And two cats that are caricatures of Abbott and Costello, the comedy team, are trying to get a hold of this bird. They want to eat it. And they put a ladder up on the branch, and Abbott urges Costello, the fat cat, to climb the ladder and get the bird, bring the bird down. So we see the bird, we see Tweety lying in the nest asleep. Here comes the cat to the top of the ladder, and down below him, Abbott, the cat, is yelling, "Get the bird! Bring me the bird! Give me the bird!" And Abbott and Costello looks into the camera and goes, "If it weren't for the Hayes board, I'd give him the bird."
Oh gosh,
And,
yeah.
I was a teenager before I got that joke.
Yeah,
He's going to flip him the bird, except that the Hayes board won't let him give him the finger. So that's an example of the kind of adult humor that would fly over the kids' heads while, the cat's just being silly. And then, of course, the Tweety wakes up and smashes him over the head with a mallet and he falls to the ground and the kids all laughed. It's that kind of thing. It was done in fun. It was not really, it was gently suggestive. There was nothing explicit.
I like the way I know the way they approach. Is it called the third wall or the fourth wall when they look at the camera? And they're the fourth wall when they look at the camera and they talk right at you in the audience.
Yes.
The missus also said that if they sat on the same bed, both had to have one foot on the floor too.
Yes. Yeah, that's the Hayes board.
Yep.
So I mean, this Red here from Red Hot Riding Hood, which was the title of the cartoon, passed muster with the Hayes board. But in the 1990s, Knick Knack got edited, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me! I just found this out like in the last 2 days. I didn't know that Knick Knack had been edited. I have the edited version on the disc that I own, and I had never heard of or seen the original.
Now, is this okay? So did the edited version is the one that actually made it out to theaters when it was released, right?
Well, yeah. It was released on DVD as an extra for Finding Nemo. It might have been shown in the theater before Finding Nemo. I don't remember.
Well, but
that was the theatrical release. That was what they put on the discs. Apparently the original only ever appeared on a Laserdisc set, and then was never released again. So it's just.
That is interesting to see how that happens. Yeah, exactly. It's like why change these? Why does this pass that this doesn't? And it just it doesn't surprise you what happens. And the problem is once you start, where do you stop?
Right.
because one of the things is consistency. If you stop one, where do you where what's to say the next one is crossing a line? And the problem it's like even in football with officiating and stuff. A lot of times the problem with some of the officiating is the rules are not the rules are really subjective. And
Right.
anytime you resort rules, whether it's uh, art standards, clothing standards, sports rules, whatever, and if you get into judgment calls, it can vary from person to person. It's like the old definition of the P word was, I guess the Supreme Court said, I don't know, but I can tell you if I see it. Well,
Right.
the problem is that again, it's subjective, and because everything's subjective. It's like we talked about the changes from the old cartoons to the modern ones. The Elmer and Bugs with the Daffy. There was the shotgun. There was all that stuff. Marvin the Martian had the ray gun.
Right.
And it was just cartoon violence. It was accepted as that, and that it was accepted, and you you lived with it. Instead, now we have it's more the mode of that it's all influences people, but I, that's again trying to stay out of that debate. I know we're touching the line really close to it, but it's hard not to. That's the thing, is it's hard not
Yeah.
to get into some of these areas of debate when you go back with what we're going to see with what you have the older cartoons. Look how classic the art is. Look how it's defined. Look how much better it looks to a lot of the modern animation, and yet
Yes.
they still tell a solid story that's not dumbed down. And I like my SpongeBob. I wish Hungry was here. I like my SpongeBob for when I want to be really completely mind wiped, but you know, there's nothing like a Bugs Bunny cartoon that it's fun and teaching a lesson and pretty smart. The Star Trek animation series was a Saturday morning television show, and it definitely doesn't dumb anything down.
No.
So
Did you watch Ren and Stimpy?
no, because the daggum Chihuahua just grossed me out.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yes.
The two guys who invented Ren and Stimpy, who were the main animators on that, did a commentary on a Warner Brothers cartoon on my collection. And they said they were inspired by Bob Clampett's exaggerated character shapes. That where Clampett would do crazy things with his characters. He'd have his animators do crazy things.
Right.
And the problem I have is that Clampett's characters were not, as you say, scary, ugly all the time. They would become exaggerated because of a reaction to something, but then they'd go back to being semi-normal. Whereas I agree with you. Ren and Stimpy when I talk about art style, Ren and Stimpy is my go-to example of that is an art style I cannot watch.
Right.
I cannot look at them. But I'll give you here's another example here. This is a scene from a Bob Clampett cartoon. This is a gremlin, a literal little man who causes problems in airplanes, which is an expression from back in the day. If you have a bug in your, today we say you have a bug in your software. Back in the day, you had a gremlin in your engine if it was running rough. And this is a contest between Bugs Bunny and a gremlin. It was made during World War II. And this is an example of Bob Clampett, the way Bob Clampett wanted his characters to be animated in an extreme circumstance. You'll see this.
Okay.
Shared. There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bugs's mouth is half his height. Its hands are turned into spikes. The impact of the wrench on his foot is sending rays of light into the air. There's a blur behind the movement of the gremlin where he's slammed this thing down on Bugs's foot. This is what I mean when I say they would exaggerate a character in order to get a reaction. And Tex Avery did the same thing. I have others of his that I could show, but this is, you look at the gremlin, he's still cute. You look at Bugs, he's ugly, but he's in agony with his foot being crushed. And Bugs goes back to being normal Bugs after he recovers from having his foot slammed with a monkey wrench. This is the difference between, you know, the guys back in the day and what the Ren and Stimpy animators took away from it was that they made him ugly all the time. They made him exaggerated all the time.
Oh yeah, there was one episode where they were sick, or one of them was sick, and it was the most disgusting thing in the world. You know, they did what they set out to by making them look sick, but it's hard to watch. It was too sickening. You know, just instead of leaving something to the mind. One of the things that we talk around here about a lot of things is the overuse of visual stimulus, and you know, basically instead of leaving something to the viewer's mind, like say Trilogy of Terror, you don't see a lot of actual physical violence. I mean, violence and blood and stuff, but it's more in your mind, that the chant of the tiki doll and you know, and the way he runs around and stuff like that. And then they just kind of cut. There is some violence in it, but it's not like slasher, you know, like the modern slasher films.
Right.
And I think also like what we got with animation is some of these you knew when Bugs Bunny was sick. He had a hot compress on his head. His eyes are drowsy, you know, things like that. Ren and Stimpy was, let's see how many colors of yellow and green we can work in there. You know, right. Very disgusting. So
yeah. Well, the other thing with these cartoons, and this is something that's lost, and I read an article a while back about a guy who said, you know, I learned a lot of culture from watching Looney Tunes, if you can believe that. He says, when I was a kid, I couldn't have told you who Franz Liszt was or what the Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 sounded like, but I could hum it because Bugs Bunny played it. And there's one of my favorite examples of something that I saw as not as a really small kid, but I remember seeing this and asking my dad about it because he lived through World War II, which is when this cartoon was made. And if you look at what Bugs is pointing at, they're in an airplane that has just run out of gas and stopped a few feet from the ground because obviously when it's out of gas, it comes to a stop, right? And the gremlin says, "Sorry, folks, we ran out of gas." And Bugs points to the card on the next window and says, "Yeah, you know how it is with these A cards."
Oh, gosh,
now I would ask my dad. By the way, that says you probably can't see it. It's very small print right down here, but that card says A mileage ration.
Yeah,
that is a gas rationing card for World War II. That's the smallest gas ration you could get. It was only a few gallons a week. So it's understandable that the airplane ran out of gas because it only has an A card. And my dad explained it to me, and I would as soon as I understood that, I got the joke, and I was laughing at it. He says, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Because the airplane ran out of gas." And Bugs says, "Yeah, you know how it is with these A cards." And my father said, "I got to see this cartoon," and he watched it with me, and laughed himself. So this is another example. This is where you get glimpses into the culture of the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, watching these Looney Tunes cartoons. I don't know what culture you get a glimpse of watching cartoons since like the 90s. They don't want to present any of that. You know, the SpongeBob SquarePants, the Ren and Stimpy. Ren and Stimpy did one. I'll give them that. Remember the ad for the log?
No, I don't.
Everyone wants a log. You gotta get a log. Your friends all want a log. You should have a log. By Blammo. Well,
I don't. Yeah.
That's a parody of an ad from the 60s that went like this. Everyone wants a slinky. You gotta get a slinky.
Oh, wow.
From Whammo.
All right.
It's a straight up parody of the slinky ads of the 60s. And when I saw that, that's the one thing I ever saw in Ren and Stimpy that made me laugh out loud. So
yeah,
they try, but there's very little of that now.
Yeah,
and that's the other thing. That's another thing that's been lost from the cartoons is that acculturation for kids. You know, you learn
Exactly.
something about music. You learn something about, you know, uh, the things your parents have to worry about, like gas rationing or a
Hmm.
victory garden. Um, in the World War II, that, by the way, that is a World War II cartoon. It was made during the war.
Right.
So
Right.
technically it constitutes a propaganda cartoon. Um, one of the things you hear a lot in the World War II cartoons is the first bar. Excuse me for 1 second.
Okay. And hello, Mr. Niblick. Good to see you tonight. Powder toast, man. Okay.
You hear the
Welcome.
first bars of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Da 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 dum.
Yeah,
Da da
exactly.
da dum.
Yeah.
That was all over the place in World War II because in Morse code, dot 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 dash is the letter V,
Hmm.
and V stood for victory.
Right.
So if they wanted to just put in a subtle plug for "we're in it to win it," you'd get that da 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 dum pattern.
Hmm.
I mean, it's and those are hard to find. I saw very few of them as a kid because they mostly pulled them out of circulation after World War II.
Well, it's an
I
interesting point that you bring up with that about the cultural aspect, because uh, I will we'll hit the Simpsons for a little bit on that point, because I remember when the Simpsons came out, in the first few years, people were, especially the generations ahead of us, were like, "This is old. I mean, this is disrespectful. This is horrible. It's tearing the family down." Basically, it was. I mean, but it became a microcosm of society overall as a whole. It still kind of told what real life was like, but you know, outside of that, I mean, when I look at a lot of cartoons, is even Beavis and Butthead could get those right sometimes. But when you look at
or
most of the other modern cartoon shows, like you said, it does not it does not teach us cultural lessons or that stuff. I remember the symphonies and stuff. I really do,
yeah,
because of those cartoons. And hell to JT Kirk.
yeah, you mentioned Beavis and Butthead. The other one that did a good job with that actually for modern cartoon was King of the Hill.
Oh yeah.
There were some very interesting episodes of King of the Hill that talked about, growing up, coming of age, like,
Hmm.
the first deer hunt and how Hank screwed that whole thing up for Billy. I think it was Billy. Um,
Bobby,
and Bobby.
Bobby.
I didn't see many of them, but I did see the one where Bobby was supposed to go deer hunting for the first time. He just turned old enough to go hunting this time,
Hmm.
and Hank waits till the last minute. And of course, they're in Texas, and there are very few places to hunt except on private land. And he finds out that every place that he can afford is booked except this one.
Yeah.
And he takes Bobby, and if you watch it, I mean, I'm a deer hunter. I hunted deer for years, and this Texas is the only state where hunting over bait is legal. So they're sitting in this tripod stand with a feeder in front of them, and at the appointed hour, the feeder turns on and starts spraying grain on the ground, and all these deer come out of the woods into the clearing in front of him, and he says, "Now pick your deer, Bobby." And Bobby says, "Dad, this isn't really hunting, is it?" And he says,
Yeah.
Hank says, "No, it really isn't." He says, "I don't think I want to shoot a deer here today." Okay, so they get in the truck, and they're driving home. And when they get home, Bobby bounces into the house yelling, "I got my first deer! I got my first deer!"
Oh,
And his mother comes out and says to Hank, "He got his first deer?" And Hank says, "Yeah. Now, help me clean the muck off of the bump grill of my truck because they hit it on the way home."
oh my God, that's too funny. That's too
And so
funny.
Bobby got his first deer, but he didn't shoot it over bait. And it was just it the story didn't have anything bad to say about hunting. It was all
No,
about a boy
and his
coming of
dad.
age to the age where I can go hunting with my dad now.
Yep,
And, in southern states and Texas, that's a big deal.
it
And I
is.
was very impressed that they didn't put any snide remarks in. They didn't have a neighbor like, "Oh, you're going to go kill Bambi." How
Well,
many times have I heard that?
or if they put a character like that, it would be like a spoof character. There'd be some way about back to it. But let me say hello to our Australian friend down there, hungry for real super scroll Marvel. Hey, hungry, how are you doing tonight? He said, "Hola, Fab Topic, great guest. We got the great Just Another Redshirt with us tonight. Appreciate you being here, Redshirt. as always
Yeah.
on these topics. Well, like I really with the Beavis and Butthead is just or well, the Mike Judge, that King of the Hill episode, also did Beavis and Butthead, and there are
Yes.
lots of parallels with the way they wrote it. It was teenage delinquents, but it was also still a real reality on the way that society really was. I mean, a lot of your shows. That's why some of the stuff I think with South Park on the edge, their writers tend to do that. Now, it's not uplifting necessarily and redemptive like the old style was, but at least it's more maybe of a cynical view of, but it's more realistic of what the society is at large.
It is. It is. It's very, in fact, I think cynical is a really good actual description of a lot of South Park.
Mm-hmm.
It rags on everybody, so at least it's an equal opportunity offender.
Yeah.
But I think it is a fairly cynical view of society, and they pick their topics fairly carefully, and they do them well. The writing is outstanding. I will admit that paper cutout animation drives me nuts. I would rather just sit and listen to a South Park episode than watch it.
Yeah.
But it's they do that's the thing. Not all modern animation is badly written. There's a lot that's really well written. The problem is that's the easy part, right? For animation, writing it is no harder than writing for a movie or a television episode. Whereas the animation part can get ridiculously time consuming, expensive. And that's why we have so few places. And I'll tell you, the reason that I don't think it's a coincidence that full drawn, pencil drawn animation started in the Great Depression in the 1930s. It really came of age then. And I think it's because you could hire a room full of artists for a handful of peanuts, because it was the Depression. If you had a job, you were fairly well off. You were doing okay. If you didn't have a job, you were in deep trouble. So people would do anything to get and keep a job.
Right.
And, Snow White came out in 1937. Warner Brothers got big in the late couple of years after that. And then MGM picked up a couple of people from Warner Brothers, and Tom and Jerry and some of their other cartoons got going. That was the start of the golden age. And I think it was because it was the Depression.
Yep.
And it was cheap. So you could afford to pay for full animation. You were also leasing your cartoons to theaters, not to television.
Exactly.
And that was
Hungry said animation VO voiceover means a lot to him, and King of the Hill slaughtered it with the VO. And Redshirt, you have a fab voice for VO.
Thank you.
Go
ahead.
Okay, I was going to say.
Well, no, just to say,
go ahead.
You go ahead then. You got it pulled up.
Yeah, a lot of edgy shows are able to get away with crazier stories because they're morals in the end. Family Guy, South Park do crazy stories, but they have something to learn. I even love it when they, at the end of the day, at the end of South Park, Kyle's like, you know what I learned today? And the kids are like, well, you know what we learned today? And kind of, throw the lesson in your face. But go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, the end of, and I think the biggest sea change in animation from the original stuff, from that full animation to everything we've had since, starting in the 60s, was that movie theaters stopped showing cartoons.
Right.
You used to get a couple of cartoons, maybe a newsreel, then your feature film, then you went home. They replaced the cartoons with coming attractions, trailers.
Right.
And I've lost count of the number of times I've sat in a movie theater and watched 5 trailers and said, I don't want to watch a single one of these things.
Yep.
You just wasted 25 minutes of my life.
And bad trailers can hurt your movie.
Yes.
That's what they don't understand, because I tell you, with the new Marvels, when I saw the first Marvels trailer coming out, I actually was kind of okay. I was like, okay, well, maybe this won't be so bad. But the next 2 trailers got progressively worse. And it's like, oh, so, just like we talk about quality animation, quality trailers, quality cover, comic book art,
Right.
it's in your details, and sometimes you lose your audience that way that quickly. If they don't see something they like right at the beginning, good luck getting them back, no matter how good of a story you've got.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Trailers are supposed to make people want to go see your movie. If the trailer doesn't do that, you failed.
yep. Let's see. Hungry Boy said, "Well, we asked a handful of peanuts. Also, many Australians got sick of drawing baby faces on soup cans." And then he said, "I think Redshirt and I missed the Herculoids and OG Johnny Quest. So let's use this as a point to go back, because I know you've got a few other albums, folders and stuff, and some particular animators. So let's use this to transition back. I don't remember the Herculoids, but I remember the original Johnny Quest. What was your opinion on like those shows?"
I don't remember the Herculoids. Johnny Quest I definitely saw occasionally. It was not it wasn't something I watched regularly because it was very story oriented, like comic books are. You couldn't miss one, if I remember correctly.
Well,
You
okay,
needed
then
to, you
go
needed
ahead.
to see them all, or you got lost.
Okay, well then let's look at it back to 60s, 70s, between all the Looney Tunes. Did you have a favorite cartoons, either series or episode, that you really liked?
Well, my favorite cartoons in the 60s and 70s were really easy. They were anything with Bugs Bunny in it.
Oh, there you go.
Absolutely. And I mean, I was a huge fan of those. I watched the Pink Panther cartoon. I like the Pink Panther cartoons.
I love the Pink Panther.
Yeah. I mean, that was where Friz Freeling landed after Warner Brothers. He'd been at Warner Brothers since the
Now
20s.
can we talk about him for a minute? Because you and I talked about this in a chat, I think, when I was either doing a stream or something. We talked about, I think it was one of my streams earlier, and maybe you came on that night a little bit for us. Tell us about how Friz Freeling made his name and got in there, because that name was everywhere with the Pink Panther and other shows in the 70s.
Yes. And that was the twilight of his career, because he started basically in the late 20s or early 30s. And I think he started with Disney and then jumped ship. But basically, he wound up at Warner Brothers making Merry Melodies cartoons. Now, early on, there were two classes of cartoon at Warner Brothers. Merry Melodies, which were color and set to music. All music. It was a musical. And then there were Looney Tunes, which were black and white. And they were more gag-oriented, humor-oriented.
Okay.
So Friz Freeling cut his teeth on cartoons where he had to make every single character in every single scene work in sync with the music that had been recorded for the cartoon. So he became an absolute master of syncing the action on the screen with the soundtrack in the background, because that was the whole point of a Merry Melody. And when they finally in the late 30s or early 40s said, okay, we're going to give up on these two. We're just going to make Looney Tunes, and we're going to make them in color. If Friz Freeling wanted to put a song in, he already knew how to synchronize the character's motions or dancing or what have you to the song. And he was not, he created, for one, he created Yosemite Sam. That was his character. And he invented Yosemite Sam because he got tired of having Bugs Bunny, just walk over every other Warner Brothers character. He says, I'm going to make a character that can give Bugs Bunny a run for his money. So he created Yosemite Sam. And the story goes, he went to Mel Blanc and said, Mel showed him a character sketch of this pint-sized guy in a huge 10-gallon hat. And he said, I'm creating a new character. He's going to be the smallest possible character in the biggest possible hat with the biggest possible voice and the biggest temper. I need a voice for him. And Mel said, okay, I'll go figure it out. Well, Mel spent a week or two trying out all sorts of different voices, but none of them sounded right. Until one day he was driving down a boulevard in Hollywood with his son in the passenger seat next to him, and a man cut him off in traffic. And he says in his book, and at that moment, I discovered the voice of Yosemite Sam.
Imagine what bad traffic drivers will do for you,
Yep.
the
So,
motivation they give you. Yeah.
yep. So Mel always recorded all of the characters' lines together because he said he couldn't switch voices that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and I always recorded Yosemite Sam's lines last because after shouting all of Yosemite Sam's lines, his voice was shot for a day and he
Right.
couldn't record anything else. So yeah,
Yeah.
Yosemite Sam is basically just Mel Blanc really angry.
Oh, that's too funny. But yeah, I mean, which then would normally take somebody's voice out, because I know a lot of voice actors too have to protect their voices, and some I don't think he'll mind me saying it. Our friend Hungry here, he'll come on the show and he's got to rest his voice later because you know if you too loud, too laughy, whatever, it takes a wear and tear on you. So, and he did say that 66 was story by story, designed that you could pick up from any episode. The remake decades later was episodic. So, yeah, and
Okay.
I look at this. He said that Yosemite and Foghorn are his favorite Warner Brother characters from the classic age.
Yeah, Foghorn's great. That's a
I
Bob
tell you,
McKimson character
I
that
tell you,
was
son. I
invented by
tell you,
Bob McKimson.
son. I tell you, I tell you, son. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Tasmanian
that
Devil.
boy, I say that boy's about as sharp as a sack of wet mice.
Oh, yeah. It just those were so great. And like we talked about a little bit earlier too. I like the Pink Panther, and I remember seeing Prince Freeling's name everywhere. Of course, then what was good about the Pink Panther show, then you had they had the kind of the Inspector Clouseau type Pink Panther built into the same episode,
Right.
and it
And
really his little police guy did all this solving, and they also had
yes,
the aardvark too. Go ahead,
yes, Sergeant Dudu
so did you do?
was
Yes,
was the policeman who was with him. And
yeah.
actually, that's from a movie called A Shot in the Dark.
No, really.
That was a Clouseau movie that wasn't a Pink Panther movie. It's from the mid 60s. And they decided to include essentially Clouseau and Sergeant Dudu in their, because they already had the Pink Panther in his own cartoon. So they
Right.
did a Shot in the Dark version. And The Shot in the Dark, I just have to say, it's not a great movie, but it has one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen Peter Sellers do. He's following a young woman, very pretty young woman,
Mm-hmm.
and he follows her out into the woods, and she pulls in to a driveway in the woods, and there's a sign next to the driveway. It says Camp Sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to the sergeant, "Stop here. Come back for me in an hour. I'm going to see what is afoot at this Camp Sunshine. It's a nudist camp."
Oh
And
gosh.
he winds up walking around with a guitar on one side of him, holding a guitar on one side and a pool float on the other. And all of the foliage is perfectly positioned in each camera shot to block off any pit's ass or anything else that they can't show. And he goes through the entire scene nude, but you never see anything. And it's hysterically funny just how uncomfortable he is at being there. It's a brilliant scene that is probably the best thing in that entire movie. And yes, that's the Clouseau that I think was included in the Pink Panther cartoon. And the aardvark was great. Yes, they were fun. They were really well written.
Mm-hmm.
They were really intelligently written, and Freeling wouldn't have had it any other way. He was an absolute perfectionist. And Philip DePotti, his partner, was the money guy.
Right.
And Freeling was the creative director. He was the director of the cartoons and hired all of the artists and stuff. And they're, in my opinion, they're some of the best cartoons out of the 70s. Hanna-Barbera is okay, but they aren't my favorite. The Flintstones is cool mainly because it's a straight up parody of the show The Honeymooners with Jackie Gleason.
Right.
So and the funny one is that Barney Rubble's voice is provided by Mel Blanc.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yep. He went on to voice Barney Rubble, and in the Jetsons he was Mr. Spacely of Spacely Sprockets.
It's just
George gets
amazing how
Foss.
voices did some voice actor did so many characters in so many different things. I mean, they were producing these episodes all the time. I mean, more so than I think a lot of the more modern ones. But I I liked like I said, I liked the Pink Panther with that. One thing with Hanna Barbera, we at Universal Studios in Orlando, one of the original rides was uh, let's see, the Hanna Barbera ride. Basically, Dick Dastardly came and took Elroy Jensen, and you had to go save them on these 3D simulator cars and stuff like that just bounced you around a little bit. And it was like cool. But what was really cool with that ride is you had both Hanna and Barbera in the pre-show
Oh,
introducing it.
cool.
The live men out there filmed, and they do it. And one of them, I think, was I don't know if it's Barbera, the dark haired guy, I think, did the drawing for that of Dick Dastardly's spacecraft. And then, it was really neat to see how they did it and also tribute with the actual creators there in the ride as part of the ride. And then brought the various properties in, from Flintstones to Jetsons. It just was really, really cool to see if anybody had seen it. Let me say hello to to Small Time Republic. Good to see you tonight. We got 11 people here. Hey, recently watched Return to the Planet of the Apes, the 70s cartoon. Wow. I did not know they had a cartoon version of that movie. Did you know about this small Redshirt?
No, I didn't. I didn't know
No.
that there was a cartoon version of Planet of the Apes. I remember
No.
seeing the original movie
Yeah.
with Charlton Heston.
Yeah, Moses. I always call him Moses affectionately, but hey. But you know what's interesting, and let me ask, I do want to get back to your folders because I know you spent some time. Fritz Frayling is one that came up because I know we had talked about it before. But one thing I want to see what your thoughts on comparing this. Okay, we in the 70s we had we talk about the older ones, the Hanna-Barberas, the Bugs Bunny, all this stuff, but I did not realize at the time we, really had more Japanese stuff coming over in anime. Like one of my favorite shows was Battle of the Planets. Which that is a different art style than the American arts like we see with Looney Tunes, isn't it?
It is. And there's also Americanized anime. One of the examples of that would be Speed Racer, which I watched as a kid. I kind of outgrew it and stuck to and moved more into watching Looney Tunes. But I did watch a fair amount of the Speed Racer cartoons. And the thing that I noticed right off the bat, and I still notice it in a lot of anime, is the extremely round, large eyes that a lot of anime characters are given. Like the Japanese are trying to draw an occidental eye without the epicanthic fold, without the shape of a Japanese character's eye. And because there aren't a lot of Caucasian people in Japan, they seem to exaggerate it. There's also Marine Boy. That was another anime cartoon series that was in the 60s that I did watch occasionally. They were interesting, but you could tell with Speed Racer in particular, because you could watch Speed Racer and then watch the Bugs Bunny show back to back practically. Speed Racer was already using partial animation. And that's one thing that the anime has long done, is they mix partial and full animation. They only use full animation when they absolutely have to. But if they're going to have two characters having a conversation, it's going to be partially animated. And it kind of, it's to me, it's like, it's jarring to see the switch back and forth. But that may just be me.
Yeah. Well, what I learned at just recently a few years ago is that even though, in Battle of the Planets, but there was so much from the original series over in Japan that the American censors had changed. And, the whole thing with Zoltar and, then we got Zark 7. There's a lot of stuff that got thrown in or changed, out of the original lore that was a little I guess, above the American viewing audiences. So the censors, forced some changes in there for a lot of things.
Yep.
Some of the characters. So, let's see. Oh yeah,
Well,
small time.
Hungary had an interesting question at 8:12 about traditional hand painted backgrounds compared to digital backgrounds today.
At 8:12
And
or
I will
9:12.
uh
Oh, there we go.
8:12
Okay,
Central,
yeah.
9:12 your
Okay,
time.
9:12. There we go. How does
Yeah.
Redshirt feel about traditional hand painted backgrounds compared to the switch to digital fake painted BGs today?
Yeah, I mean the hand painted backgrounds are amazing when they're done well. And some of the classic cartoon artists were amazing background artists. But for a relatively modern one that I actually loved, and I'm not sure whether it was digitally created, it probably was, but it still was done really well, was the anime Princess Mononoke. The one thing that absolutely blew me away about that anime movie was that the scenery, the backgrounds were just so beautifully rendered. And whether they did it in a computer or they did it with painting by hand, they paid attention. They really worked to get a realistic looking, very, very beautiful scenery background to a whole lot of shots in that. And I actually rated, when I was on a stream talking about it a while back, about a year ago, I said, well, I'll give the backgrounds a 9, give the animation about a 7.5, and the story about an 8, because the animation didn't live up to the story and the backgrounds. So when it doesn't matter how they make them, if the backgrounds are done with care and they're supposed to provide a setting. They're not supposed to upstage the action that's occurring in the story. And you don't want to have you just don't want it to be too busy where you get distracted by all the details in the background. You stop paying attention to what's going on in the story. But I mean, animation can be computer animation. Look at Pixar as an example. Computer animation can be done amazingly well when you do it well. If you need to put time and effort and money into it to make it come out well, it's also easy to make it look really trashy, because cheap animation is just cheap animation. I don't care whether it's backgrounds or characters or drawings or whatever. So the thing you can look for that I look for in an animated cartoon, whether it's a short or a feature film, is did the animators pay attention to the characters they were creating? Do you buy the character as a character? And is the setting in which they appear believable? Can you buy the setting? And if they can do that, it'll work. And the better the art style, and the better the more it's animated, the more dynamically it's animated, generally, the better it's going to look. And it's usually going to be a keeper.
Yep, absolutely. Like I said, I'm a guy that likes pictures. If it looks good, I'm willing to give it a chance. That's the way I'm with comic books. That's the way I'm with movies. That's the way I'm, animation. Many times my kids have got me into stuff. I like the way it looked. You can hook them with a good visual. So, all right. So, where do you let me free it up to you, because I know you had gotten a couple of things. I know we talked about Looney Tunes and all that, but with some of what you've had, what do you want to share with us? We can go in any direction at this point.
I was muted. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I got a couple of stories that I think would be fun to hear.
Okay, cool.
And some images to go with the second one.
Okay.
So there's a story that Chuck Jones told in his book, Chuck 'Em Up, that he and his writer.
Can I ask a question real quick? Chuck Jones, what shows do we know Chuck Jones for, just for clarity?
How the Grinch Stole Christmas. 1965 or 6.
Okay.
He also did he also created the Roadrunner and the Coyote.
Okay.
So all of those cartoons are Chuck Jones cartoons.
Okay. All right.
He also created Pepe Le Pew. Those are Chuck Jones cartoons.
Which we know is such a problem these days. But,
Well, quick note on that. There was a guy who was an animator at Termite Terrace, which is what all the people who worked there called the building they worked in for Warner Brothers. He called it Termite Terrace because it was a falling down, clapboard building. And this guy thought he was God's gift to women. He was convinced he was the most handsome, debonair, suave, debonair character that ever walked the earth. And he could never understand why women he didn't appeal to women. Because they always turned him down.
Oh boy!
And the character of Pepe Le Pew was created as a parody of him.
Oh,
the guy who thinks he's going to get it lucky tonight and never does. Pepe's not a predator; he's clueless.
Yes,
that's the thing about Pepe.
That's what makes him so funny too, is that he's so clueless to it, and he's just it's what every guy should have as a thing. Like, hey, that's ultimate confidence. Go out and never take failure for, just go work through the rejection. Oh man, yep.
So that's Chuck Jones. He was probably the most prolific character creator of all the directors at Warner Brothers.
Okay, sorry for distracting. I wanted to kind of help. So the story was that the
story is that Chuck and his writer, the writer is the guy who does the storyboards and comes up with the gags in a cartoon. They were in a room one day having a discussion when the producer, Eddie Seltzer, he was the new producer. He was the producer to pretty much the end of Warner Brothers Cartoon Studio. Walked by the open door. According to Chuck, in his book, Seltzer saw them in the room, stuck his head in the doorway, and without any greetings stated, "I don't ever want to see a cartoon about bullfighting. There's nothing funny about bullfighting," and left. Just walked away. And Chuck and Jones and Maltese looked at each other a bit in shock at this sudden interruption. And Maltese said, "Well, I guess that means we have to do a cartoon about a bullfight." And Jones said, "Why?" To which Maltese replied, "Because Eddie's never been right before."
Oh gosh. There you go.
So they made a cartoon called Bully for Bugs. And I'm going to get this shared up here because I have some pictures from it. They made this cartoon. You might recognize these if you've seen this cartoon. You certainly will. Bugs in his, usual intro for Bugs. He's tunneling his way to some destination, and he's failed to make the left turn at Albuquerque.
Oh, yes.
And he comes up in the middle of a bull ring here. Now, he's going to the Coachella Valley and the big carrot festival they're in.
Right.
And he decides to ask the matador for directions. The matador is running for his life. They have here. With the bull chasing him. So Bugs is running alongside him with his map, asking him, how do I get from here to the Coachella Valley? And here's the guy just in absolute terror, running as fast as he can. And Bugs and the matador get to the edge of the bull ring, and the matador scrambles up over the wall, leaving Bugs behind with the bull breathing on his tail.
Yes.
And Bugs turns around and says, "Stop," slaps the bull right on the nose and says, "Stop steaming up my tail. What are you trying to do? Wrinkle it?" Well, that infuriates the bull.
Yep.
And the bull backs off to the middle of the ring, comes roaring back, blasts Bugs with the boss of his horns at his head out of the bull ring, completely over the top of the stand.
And I love it is because he went like bent over like a T. His legs were straight up. He was bent over at the butt, and it was just just not flailing, just going up and up and over. It was. I just love the way they had him flying out of the ring. So.
Yep. And at this point, notice Bugs still has his map in his hand. So.
Yeah.
And at this point, he looks into he looks right into the camera and says his famous line, "Of course you realize this means war."
You know, and I also love the way they did the dialogue. Albuquerque. They usually, it was always,
Albuquerque.
it's in Walla Walla, Washington, or Albuquerque, and they always said it a little different. That's what I love with it.
Well, when that's another voice that Mel Blanc was tasked with making when because Bugs had rather long gestation. He really didn't come of age until about 1940.
Hmm.
But when they said, look, Tex Avery was one of the guys who really wanted to turn Bugs Bunny into what we know as Bugs Bunny,
Right.
and he was named after Bugs Hardaway, which was
Okay.
another guy who worked there. They decided he's Bugs Bunny, and he's a
Hmm.
tough guy. And Mel Blanc said, well, the toughest guys I know are from Brooklyn or the Bronx. So I'll give Bugs Bunny an accent that sounds like both, sometimes like the Brooklyn accent, sometimes like a Bronx accent.
Hmm.
And that's where Bugs Bunny got his accent, Doc.
Oh, really?
So, yep, that was Mel Blanc making the toughest accent he could imagine for this tough character, Bugs Bunny. But there's
Hmm.
an interesting story behind that. Of course, you realize this means war. And that
Okay.
is that Chuck Jones, who directed this,
Hmm.
to him, not to the other directors, they didn't all do this, but Chuck Jones decided that Bugs Bunny was what's known as a comic hero. Now, it doesn't mean he's a funny hero. It means that he's a common guy, regular guy, who's
Right.
going to win. The tragic hero is the nobleman or the rich man who's destined to lose.
Right.
So
Daffy
this
Duck.
is
It
old
seems like it just
literary and
seems like
theater
Daffy
term.
Duck was the other. You know, poor
Oh,
Daffy Duck just get like
well,
every once
Chuck
in a while
had
he
an
got
interesting
lucky.
comment. Chuck's comment about Bugs and Daffy was Bugs is the character we all wish we were, and Daffy is the character we always realize we are.
Yes, that is true.
So, but what he decided was that Bugs, given that he, as far as Chuck was concerned, shouldn't be allowed to lose, could easily be construed as a bully, come across as
Right.
a bully.
Right.
So what Chuck decided and worked out with Mike Maltese, his writer, was that Bugs would always have to be provoked first. Then he'd deliver the line, of course, you realize this means war, which was
Hmm.
the sign to the audience that Bugs has had enough
Yeah.
and he's going to fight back. And Chuck Jones did that time after time after time in his Bugs Bunny cartoons. You always see Bugs get abused by an antagonist
Right.
until he's had enough. And then it means war.
Means war. So Hungry says like Jack Burton, Redshirt, but Bugs was first.
Jack Burton is well, no, actually, there's a great cartoon. Daffy is supposed to be the hero, and Porky Pig is supposed to be his sidekick, comic relief. But in the end, it's Porky. It's Porky who solves the problem with the villain in town, and not Daffy.
Hmm.
And to me, Jack, who thinks he's the hero of the story, is actually the comic relief. Reminds me of Daffy Duck more than that. But Jack Burton is a great character. He's one of my favorite characters. And I don't think anybody but Kurt Russell could have played him as well, because Kurt, absolutely pure bravado, total incompetent until he catches that knife and throws it back. That's his moment of glory in the movie. But yeah, that's a character inspired. I will agree
Hmm.
to this. That's a character inspired by a Warner Brothers cartoon, Jack Bird. That
Yeah.
that whole movie has little bits from the cartoons and the wisecracks and the humor, and Jack Burton getting dressed up in those ridiculous glasses looks just like Bugs Bunny trying to wear a disguise.
Oh, jeez.
And so yes, it's a very cartoonish movie. It's one of the reasons I absolutely adore that movie. And another movie I love, which was an homage to Disney, Warner Brothers, and the Fleischer Studio, is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the best combinations of animation and live action I've ever seen.
And it did it before Space Jam, didn't it?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, that is a fantastic one. And as far as I'm concerned, if you remember Red from Red Hot Riding Hood from Tex
Mm-hmm.
Avery, I'm convinced Red was the inspiration for Jessica Rabbit.
Oh yeah,
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
Sounds like Cartman. I'm fat and big bones. Sorry, I couldn't help that. I couldn't help that one. Just with Hungry out there with his Cartman voice, and just that line just reminded me of that quote so much. So
yep.
Well, we got 12 people with us tonight. Woohoo! Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here. We got the great Just Another Redshirt with us. Make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. Make sure you still have the notifications on, because weird things happen on YouTube. And follow us over on Twitch. And let's grow together. And I like tonight presenting something that is not football, not Fortnite, and a little bit different for us is talking to the great Just Another Redshirt about animation and cartoons. So, share some of your favorite old cartoons with us. We're looking like 70s, 80s, maybe back from there. But share with us what your thoughts are, what you like, what you didn't like, and well, in the remaining time we have. Now, Redshirt, with the others that you, other folders and pictures you have, the shares, I want to make sure we get to ones that you really want to get to before we run out of time. Where do you want to take us next?
We've pretty much gotten to those. I do have one story that I do have a story that ought to be a podcast by Mike Rowe. If you've ever heard of The Way I Heard It.
Yeah.
Where he tells a story and he tries to keep the person he's talking about a mystery until the very end. Mel Blanc was pretty much virtually the only voice actor to get a credit in the Warner Brothers cartoons. And he negotiated that once in lieu of a raise. Mm-hmm. And it made him the most famous voice actor probably of all time. That he was voice characterizations, Mel Blanc, on cartoons from the mid 40s all the way through the 50s. Well, Chuck Jones convinced Dr. Seuss to let him and his team create a half-hour Christmas special cartoon from the Seuss book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which I mentioned earlier. Right. This is the mid 60s. And Jones was determined that any of the voice actors on the project were going to get a credit. He didn't think it was fair that only Mel Blanc ever got credit as a voice actor at Warner Brothers. So when he saw, the problem is, when he saw the completed cartoon, he was horrified. Boris Karloff was credited as the narrator. June Foray was credited as Cindy Lou Who. But the man who sang "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" was nowhere to be found in the credits.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he called the man up at home when he saw that and apologized profusely. And the man, who's a real gentleman, said, "No, Chuck, perfectly okay. It's been, I don't require a credit. I have all the voice work I can stand to do." And that was true. Because for a couple of decades after that, and during that time, the same guy who sang "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" was probably even more famous on television with kids for providing the voice of Tony the Tiger in Frosted Flakes commercials, saying, "They're great."
Yes. Oh,
well,
right.
Well, the name of that gentleman is Thurl, interesting name, known as Thorny to his friends, Ravenscroft. He sang the song, and he was the voice of Tony the Tiger until he retired from voice acting.
And Frosted Flakes was never the same after that.
No.
No.
And he's probably one of the most famous voice actors that everybody has heard his voice.
And see, I thought Boris Karloff always did that song. So,
see, that's the thing. A lot of people think Boris Karloff sang the song because Thurl Ravenscroft didn't get credit for it, and that's why Chuck Jones was so upset. Mm-hmm. But yes, it was the voice of Tony the Tiger who sang "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch."
Yep. Wow, that is so cool. Oh man, gosh. When we do squirrel moments around here, we could actually transition this into a serial stream, but we won't do that tonight for you, Redshirt. We appreciate you being here. So just looking some other things. Any other great artists or cartoons that you think that maybe we skipped over in the old days? Because I know you mentioned like Looney Tunes, and the medley merry medleys. You know,
Yeah.
they're tongue twisters. Can't talk tonight. Then of course you had Hanna-Barbera, the studios like that producing those things. Is there like maybe one comic show or one cartoon that you think may actually be unappreciated or maybe not gotten a fair credit or that you think it's due?
Um, if there were one, I would have to say the Flintstones, because I don't think a lot of people, certainly I don't think a lot of the kids who watched it understood that it was the honeymooners. So
Hmm.
all of the jokes that were based on the honeymooners went over their heads.
Right.
The whole that was a show, and that was one of the things that's cool about Flintstones is that was a show that was that adults could watch as well as kids. It is a throwback to the classic cartoons, to the cartoons you saw in a theater.
Well, and back to what we talked about a cultural standpoint, one thing is this, the cartoons themselves were not just necessarily cultural message or whatever, but they were things that the parents and the kids could watch together. It was not
Yes.
juvenile to the point where the adults tuned out, but then again, it wasn't over the head where the kids got bored out on things. It seemed to strike that right balance, and people would come together. The parents would watch Flintstones with their kids, or even a Scooby Doo. Look at that one. The adults were into
Yep.
Scooby Doo as not more than the kids were.
Yeah, it
Because one of the
was.
biggest complaints has happened is that everybody, and because this one of the modern theories is that it's like people automatically assume or presume that if it's animated, it has to be for kids. And when they talk about for kids, we're talking like SpongeBob. Okay, I like hungry. I like SpongeBob. My limits and stuff, but I do agree that's very mindless and nonsensical. And cartoons were not that way. But those cartoons then would engage adults and kids and bring them together and stuff. Because I know parents can't stand SpongeBob and that type of humor, but there was nothing like getting with your kid to watch Scooby Doo or
Right.
even a Johnny Quest if you like Johnny Quest. Things like that. And I think from a social standpoint, like you mentioned earlier, that's one thing that's changed socially too, is the fact that the cartoons these days don't really bring parent and kid together in terms of what we see as I think maybe we'll have to define it as American cartoons. Now,
Yes.
my anime, specifically Asian anime, my wife and my kids have always watched it together. It's not necessarily a lot of the storylines are not necessarily my thing, but there's something with the art styles, with the writings, where they'll watch the stuff together.
Yes. And I think that's a lot of that has to do with the storytelling, because
Hmm.
the storytelling is not talking down to the audience. It's not dumbing down the story.
Hmm. Exactly.
I've watched a number of the Cowboy Bebop animes,
Hmm.
and I love the characters. They're fascinating characters. Yes, the art style occasionally is a little odd to me, but the characters are well defined. They're they're entertaining to watch and interact, and the stories are fairly involved. I think I've watched the first 5 or 6 of them, and I'm still trying to figure out if they're ever going to get a bounty, because I don't think they did in the first 6 episodes. I think they always got stiffed.
Hmm. Oh
So
yeah.
they're interesting. They're underdogs,
Hmm.
and underdogs are always likable. So they're
Well,
always trying to come back
yeah,
and finally
exactly.
score a bounty.
Or the guy gets the girl. Pepe Le
Right.
Pew gets the cat. But hey, but
Yes.
but Hungry said you are his favorite guest on YouTube for the past 5 months, Richard.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Um, let's see. We won't presume upon Redshirt to speak upon Archer and wrapping up moments. I'm not
Yeah, I
sure.
haven't seen Archer. I have
Okay, well,
seen Bakshi. And I will
uh,
say Bakshi did. I remember Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. Very ambitious project. He
well,
tried to do the Lord of the Rings in 2 movies, and he did the
really,
entire thing in rotoscope, which meant that he had to go to Spain and hire several thousand extras to ride horses around and pretend to be orcs and dwarves and elves, and then draw characters over them cell by cell with a rotoscope.
Right.
And it cost a fortune, and the movie made nothing. And they never made a sequel. They never finished the movie as a result.
Oh
But that was
gosh.
Bakshi's most ambitious project. And I will say this, the thing that was the most phenomenal about Bakshi's Lord of the Rings were the ring wraiths, the 9 riders.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Even Peter Jackson's ring wraiths were not as eerie and creepy as the creatures that Bakshi animated into his movie. They actually I know he got a stunt rider, because at one point when they're first trying to escape from the Shire, and the one rider catches up with them, he's sniffing. If you remember in the Jackson movies, he leans over the edge of the sort of cliff face and sniffs. In the Bakshi story, the horse rides up across their path, across their trail, and the rider leans down all the way to put his nose to the ground without leaving the saddle, and sniffs the ground for their scent, and then climbs back up into the saddle and follows them. It is the most eerie thing I've ever seen.
Wow.
And knowing it was rotoscope, they must have gotten some stunt rider who could literally get 3/4 of the way out of the saddle and sniff the ground and then come back into the saddle and keep going.
Well, Hungry said
It is a really
they said the budget issues, that's why it went south.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the budget for rotoscoping is all the way to the moon. You have to film an entire movie and then draw an entire cartoon over the top of every frame of film.
Wow.
That after you edit it to make your movie. It's incredibly expensive. It's about probably the most expensive form of animation there ever has been. And Bakshi tried to make an entire two movie feature pair out of it. And the movie there was just never the budget there to do it well, to do it the first place, because he had to cut so much out. It meant that the people who knew the Lord of the Rings didn't like it because it left too much out. And the people who didn't know the Lord of the Rings couldn't follow it because it left so much out.
Right.
So
yeah,
it doomed it.
Yeah, I understand. It's kind of like I equated to the Firm, which was nothing like the book. I hated it, went and bought the book to read it. But then when the Pelican Brief came out, when I watched Pelican Brief, it was a good thing that I read the book, because the movie made no sense, because they were jumping massive time things, and if you hadn't read the book, you wouldn't have known what they were doing. And it's rough when that happens. You can't enjoy the story. You got questions, we want answers,
right?
At least so many. But hey, no, Redshirt Hungry asked, do you remember Adults Get It episodes from Looney Tunes where laudanum was used? It's been disappeared.
I don't think I've ever seen a Looney Tunes cartoon that referenced laudanum. I know what it is, but I didn't when I was a kid.
Cartoons used to be for everyone. Yeah, absolutely. So,
well, you know what killed that? What made cartoons for kids and gave us this perception that cartoons are for children is that they wound up for so long on Saturday mornings, interspersed between ads for cereal and toys, while parents were getting were sleeping in because the kids were busy watching cartoons, so the parents could grab an extra hours or 2 hours worth of sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
That is what made cartoons, gave the perception. I'm pretty sure the Flintstones weren't on in the morning, and I think that's part of the reason why it was one that families watched and adults would watch. But it's been so long since anybody's made a cartoon that could be shown in prime time, 8 or 9 o'clock on a Thursday night after dinner, that the family could go and sit down and all watch. The default assumption now is that if it's animated, as you said, if it's animated, it's got to be for children.
Well, the things like Family Guy or The Simpsons, but are kind of there, but they still push the edge versus what like the old classics like Flintstones and stuff like that were. I
Yeah.
So let's see.
There's a lot of edge. I'll just say this: there's an awful lot of edginess to the Family Guy.
Oh yes, without a doubt. And I got a story for that. But to back you up, rotoscoping films live first, so shots don't work. Use the film. You must use again. Call side rockets before the drawing can begin. And he said, "You made great points." Family Guy, yeah. We were at church one time, and lady said, "Yeah, her son was being weird. He was about 3, 4, 5. His son was being weird and watching a show on TV where this kid's trying to kill his mom all the time." And we're like, "That's Family Guy." She's like, "Oh yeah, well, he watched it." And we're like, "Have you seen it yet?" "Oh no, well, it's a cartoon." And we're like, "You need to go see what it is." And so we came back later, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe he's been watching that." Like,
Yes.
well, just because it's in color does not mean it's for everybody.
Right.
So, exactly. All right. Well, let's
the one
see.
I think
go ahead.
the one I think every parent should see before they let their kids watch it is a cartoon series I have not seen on the cartoons, but I've seen pictures, stills from it, and discussions of it. And that cartoon series is Big Mouth.
Big Mouth. Okay.
Big Mouth. It makes me uncomfortable to see clips from it. I would not watch an entire episode of that.
What? When was it made?
Not that long ago. Let me look it up on IMDb. Hang on.
Yeah, because it's like, well, that sounds like it would have to be somewhere. And then where would they have seen it? Was it streaming? Was it any of the streaming services? Was it a studio? Because I'd never heard of it.
Big Mouth. Let me see if this is the one. Let me just make sure I got the right one, because there's several with this name here on IMDb. Oh yeah, that's it. 2017 to 2024, TV mature.
Mm.
It is. It's on Netflix, and it is something that literally, yeah, I wouldn't let a kid. I consider it to be R-rated, and even then, I think it's revolting. Yeah.
Oh, Hungry said he couldn't get through the first 5 minutes of Big Mouth. I'd rather watch Velma.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Big Mouth. Yeah. Big Mouth made my skin crawl. What I've seen of it. So that's the problem. There are animated series and stuff being produced today. The problem is that most of them are either for children or for adults. That's a perfect example of one that's for adults, but I don't want to meet the person that's for. I really don't.
Yeah.
Yes,
there's mature is one thing, but then even topical. There's stuff that I watch that's mature, but then there's some thematic things, whether it's live action or whatever, I will not watch if it involves certain things and stuff. I'm like you. There's something I just will not watch. I cannot watch. Period. Just the way it is.
There's some, Mrs. Dadman Walking 55. There are, from what I've seen in clips, there are some very inappropriate conversations taking place between adults and children in that cartoon series. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's mature, but who the hell is the audience for this? My feeling.
Yeah. Again,
there are mature. Well, Archer is an example of a mature one. I've seen clips from that. That's not something for kids. That's made for adults.
But
but I haven't seen it. But the bottom line is, well, you're talking about the what used to be animation used to be like probably one of the last ones with the Flintstones or the Simpsons was actually a great one for that. That's one of the reasons I think it lasted as long as it did. That was for the parents could watch with the kids. It wasn't going to shock the parents or show the kids something they weren't ready to see, and the parents would then have to spend the next 3 hours explaining it.
Yes,
but
son, you see, when a man, I'm sorry,
right? Yeah, I could just hear Hank saying that. Well, son, but Yeah.
Well, Bobby,
Yeah.
I don't know. Let me see if I'm
It's
hungry. Well, Bobby, you see, I'm just doing a crazy impression for Hungry Boy, but yeah, there's just like some topics that should be verboten and period,
yeah.
never see the light of day, and they're pushing it with some of these things that are coming out,
Yeah, they
like you
are.
said, with certain different age groups, and it's like, yeah, yeah, so yeah. Yeah, and again,
Yeah,
okay, it is TVMA. A child should not be watching it, but here's the problem: sometimes when mom and dad's gone, it's there. Kids get access to it, and you
yeah.
know, but
Yeah. I mean, I watched I was 5 years old when The Prisoner, Patrick McGowan's show in the 1960s came on CBS, and I watched the first 5 minutes of the first episode until my mom figured out what I was watching and came running into the room to turn the TV off.
oh heck yeah,
I had to wait 10 years to finish watching that series. I'm glad she turned it off. It would have given me nightmares forever.
yeah. I wish my parents would not. My dad and my sister had not had Trilogy of Terror on and let me see it when I was 5 years old. It
Yeah.
sticks with you for many years. It does, but parental controls. Yeah, I know, Mrs. You're right, but still, but I think from a thematical standpoint, I think part of what we're trying to say also is that some of these things should they even be written, you know, or some of these
Yes.
topics. See, I do not like whether, especially with live action, but I do not like things that victimize females or kids. You know,
Right.
I cannot watch those shows. You know, realism is one thing, but this is where I miss the beauty of I mean, some of our 70s cartoons had, I look at our 70s TV shows had thematic events and stuff, serious issues and stuff. You didn't see it all the time. It wasn't thrown in your face where you had to see it. You didn't hear it verbalized. But now a lot of this is into these comics and in shows. And, they've taken over the animation. The animation becomes second to the plot and what type of thing. So,
Yep.
yeah. So,
Yeah, and that's one of the complaints. That's one of the recent complaints about, the Pixar cartoons, Pixar animated features.
hmm.
Um, they're forcing things into the animation that don't necessarily contribute to the story, but they want them out there,
Mm-hmm.
and they want that the audience to be seeing it, hearing it, and experiencing it. And it's a form of propaganda, and it's not what those shows were supposed to be for. They were supposed to be for entertainment.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I
You're
love
not
the
there.
yeah.
They're not there to teach the audience, no matter how much they might think they should be teaching the audience. That's not their job.
I tell you, that's a beauty. Like I said, the 70s cartoons I grew up on. I just love those. My favorite of all of them was more the anime. Like I said, I was more Battle of the Planets guy. Because that's probably why I'm Star Wars. We got people out there the Star Trek side because it's more the science fiction. I like my pew pews though. I got to have my pew pews and bang bangs and stuff, and that's why I'm more on that side. And that's why I like Battle of the Planets. Did you have a personal favorite though that you liked?
In animation,
No, in any the cartoons that we talked about, the 60s, 70s,
in the
just
cartoons,
any of them.
yeah, in
Any
the
of them.
70s, in the 70s, easily my favorite was if it wasn't Warner Brothers, it was the Potty Freeling and the Pink Panther show.
Absolutely. I love that
That was a
still.
hoot.
And the music.
The writing in that, yeah, the writing in that was great.
That we're going to talk about some of this. We talked about it on a Battlestar Galactica overview, and we're going to be getting into it with our Buck Rogers review starting Friday night. It's like in the music, they really incorporated music seriously as a plot device in our entertainment. You heard the music. You heard like Pink Panther dun 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 dun. dun. Those tunes, those notes, they kept it. They moved the story with it. Buck Rogers has had stuff music like that. Battlestar Galactica definitely did, but it was like something in the 70s and 80s that we really used the music to advance the plot. Forward to
Yes.
SpongeBob, where it's that little fluty type stuff, which is nice, but it really just kind of like it's silly. It's out there, it doesn't do anything for you. Or look at Ahsoka with like No music. I know it's live action, but I had to throw it in there because it was one that I've seen recently where they incorporated series, but there's no music to it to help, help it stick with you. But like we said, we've named a great show that was had the music along with the animation.
Yeah, and the Pink Panther, of course, used all the music from Henry Mancini because he did the music for the actual Pink Panther movies. So the Pink Panther theme is his. Da 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 dum dum dum.
Love that show.
That's
Love
a Henry Mancini composition. His music is great. He's done a number of great film scores. He's a great composer, and he's considered to be a composer of novelty music. But the one that really came into his own in the late '60s and through the '70s, as far as movie music goes, is John Williams.
Mm-hmm.
He did Jaws. He did Star Wars. All of the Star Wars films.
Right.
That you talk about. He did the the first 2 Harry Potter films, and they kept his themes going through the remainder of them. Williams was
Indiana
a fan
Jones
of creating
too, yeah.
a theme for a character.
Yeah.
So there's Luke's theme, there's Leia's theme, there's Vader's theme, there's the Imperial March for Star Wars, and
Indiana
there's
Jones.
their mood music is what they are.
Yeah.
And
well, like
and
the indie especially is famous for Indiana Jones. I mean, the others may not realize there's a Luke theme or a Leia theme, but I mean, everybody knows the Raiders theme. It is Indiana Jones first thing you think when you hear the music.
Yep, and there's also the march, the main theme, March to Superman. That was John Williams.
Yep.
Dum da 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 dum 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 da 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 dum dum da dum. That's another character theme. That's the triumphant march for Superman. I
will say since you taught superheroes right here for just a second, it got me back to one last thing. The Justice League in the 70s. I love that show. You remember? Every week though, them and the bad guys that were always the Legion of Doom. They were just like still every week fighting to a draw. But dadgum, I'm sick of Superman and Batman. Attention, whores. I like Green Lantern. There's not enough Green Lantern on the show.
Well, I was never into comic books, so my exposure to superheroes was like the Fantastic Four cartoon series of the '60s, the Spider-Man, the Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man cartoon from the '60s, and that was my introduction to the superhero genre. And to me, the Justice League was like, are you being lazy? You can't write a cartoon episode about one of these superheroes and then do a different one or a different one. You have to bring them all together. It would just, and I've thought that ever since. This whole concept, and now of course the MCU has gone multiverse, so you can put any character in any place, any time with any other character you want, because obviously it's a multiverse. You could have 3 Spider-Man at the same place at the same time because it's a multiverse. And I'm just like, this is starting to make me feel like, the lazy writers who use time travel to create a plot because they can't figure out how to write a real plot. So they just say, oh, it's time travel. Yeah, I don't know.
I hate time travel. I hate time travel. I hate these multiverses. It's hard enough for my head to get around some of these concepts, much less trying to the multiverses. These kids may be able to do it. I can't. So, and Hungry said this is one of our best streams. Hey, thank you, Hungry Boy. He says that you need to be on karaoke. But,
well, exactly. maybe again one day.
Yeah, exactly. Don't retire yet. You got a booming voice. So, any other thoughts you want to have, Just Redshirt, before we go ahead and wrap up?
Now, I got one other comment to make. You can buy a lot of the old cartoons on disc, which I recommend because I don't know how much longer they're going to be around streaming on anything. But for now, if you don't want to buy them, you can find a ton of classic cartoons on YouTube. How they've managed to post them up in collections without getting nailed for copyright, I don't know, but there are tons of them out there.
Oh, I know.
So
I had, yeah.
you
You
can
get
see a
music,
lot of
it'll get
these.
claimed.
Yeah, but you can see a lot of these old cartoons on YouTube for free. You don't have to buy anything, and you can you can find out that you just spent an afternoon watching old Popeye cartoons or old, you know, Looney Tunes cartoons or Tom and Jerry, the classic Tom and Jerry cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be amazed. There's so much out there, and I recommend check it out, compare it to what you've seen, because they're, for the most part, they're not censored on YouTube. They didn't get the '90s treatment. These guys have uploaded the originals, and I don't know where they found them, but they found them, and there's
Yeah.
some great stuff out. There's some
Well, that's
great
why
stuff on YouTube.
Well, that's why the missus, what she does, she's got nearly 3,000 CDs and Blu-rays, or DVDs and Blu-rays, is just go into thrift shops like the Goodwill, the charity stores and stuff. You can find a lot of DVDs, and actually in good quality. You just got to go through them. We have a system where it's like a fire brigade where she throws them up, and I have to do quality control on it. One thing, you got to make sure there's a disc in it, and is the disc the right disc, and
Right.
what quality it is, but we've amassed so many at really cheap prices. Our Goodwill has, the season sets are like $4.99 for a season, but you could get 5 discs for $3.99. So you can, and of course, if they're running deals that day and discounts, you can save even more money. So just buy in quantity and pick it up as we go along. So, all right. But great point. Yeah,
All right.
definitely. Fiscal media. Get it, and that way you own it for sure.
That's right.
Oh, no. Yes. Hungry's right. The missus had to make new shelves for her huge collection.
I believe it.
Exactly. So, and even then, we still had to buy another small shelf to go with it, too. So she found out there's just a few too many. So, all right. Well, Redshirt, thank you for being with us tonight. I'm going to show a couple things, and then we'll cut off real quick. We may go live with something a little bit later, either a chill stream or a Fortnite stream. I'm not sure, a little bit later after we're complete with Redshirt here. But hey, tomorrow night at 8 p.m., join us for more football talk, SEC college football with AFK Bard, who will be joining us tomorrow night. Help us have a good time. Welcome in, AFK. We get some sports ball talk. It's always a blast. If you're a Georgia fan, you're happy. If you're an Alabama fan, you're happy. If you're a Gator fan, anyway, all the never is to keep the coach around another year. But hey, join us for that. It's going to be a great time. Also, Friday night, our first episodic review of, this is actually the original that was a theatrical showing. Then there were some edits and changes made, and it was cut into 2 parts for television. So join us Friday night here with the great Daisy Blossom, Hungry Boy, and JT Kirk as we look at the first 2 episodes of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century Awakening. Come for that. We're, it's definitely something different. And so, let's see, we go that. Let's see, we got here on Saturday afternoon at 5 p.m. I'm going to be chilling with Tony Stark of Iron. Kind of a crazy, wild young guy, and a lot of fun, and looking forward to hanging out with him for a bit. And just talking some whatever comes up, comes out type things. So we don't know where we go with that topic. We'll probably talk about Fortnite and a whole bunch of different things. So, and Hungry says, thank you, Redshirt. And he says that the soul of Mel and June thanks you.
Thank you, Hungry.
Exactly. All right. And here, live streams on videos are on YouTube and twitch.tv at DadmanWalking55, at DadmanWalking55. So one-stop shop on Twitter or as X. It's DadmanWalking55 with this avatar. Do not fall for. I actually have 3 DadmanWalking55s out there. I mean, in addition to mine, 2 of them have no activity, and you can tell they're different. But one took the avatar and the name, except for the G. So be careful if they friend you or something. It ain't me. If it's not Dadman, DADMANWALKING 55 with this avatar, it ain't me on Twitter. So hey, All right. With that said, granted, like I said, make sure on Twitch you've got the hit the notifications. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe. We're 5 away from 500, and make sure you get the notifications. And as a backup, follow me on Twitter. That's when we'll say when we go live. So I might go live later. So keep an eye on Twitter. And as Hungry says, accept no substitutes. And everybody, y'all have a wonderful day, wonderful good night. And again, thank you to the great Just Another Redshirt. It's been an honor. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.